With the Crozet Community Advisory Committee, I'm Joe Ford, the chair. As you can see, our agenda posted up here. And we will begin as we traditionally do with these meetings, with brief round of introductions. So I'll go first. Joe Ford, chair of the committee, and the highlights in here at Crozet.
Costas Hubbard, so we're about 250.
Hey, Mallory DeCosta, Western Ridge.
Lonnie Murray, Planning Commission, Whitehall Districts, Sugar Hall.
Tim Duncan, Walter Village.
I'm Allie Rush, and I live by Mill Springs.
And now I represent you on the Board of Supervisors, live in Earlsville.
Michael Monaco, I live in Emerson Commons, over by Star Hill.
And if we could, for the record, the folks who are here from the community, please.
I'm Rob Bukowski from Grey Rock.
Eric Bryant from West Ridge.
Serena Maria from the county, and Charlottesville.
Terry Moto, I live in the Highlands, I'm here for the Crozet Transfer.
Emily Kilroy, I work for the county.
Joe Vate, Old Trail, and also on the Trails Crew.
David Niamoto, Trails Crew, Highlands.
John Woodworth with Trail Crew. Tim Tolson on Emerald Ridge and with the CCAC.
I'm just visiting, I actually don't live here.
Matt Helms in Georgia.
Karen Zipprich, Westlake, for the Trail Crew.
Larry Zipprich, same location, same effort.
Terry Costu, Foothill Crossing, and Trask Crew.
Excellent, thank you very much. Tim, would you mind pulling the door closed just in case so we don't disturb it in the future? Thank you very much. Yes.
And the reason that we ask you to say where you live is to show the wide geographic area of members of the committee. That's the only reason. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Marcia. And as always, it's nice to start these meetings by reminding people that the reason that we're all here is because we care about our community. And I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy lives to join us and see talk about our community and how we can all contribute to make things even better than they already are. The first agenda item, we do have, let's see, 15 members, and we do have 8 here. So we have our quorum, so we can approve the meeting minutes. We will entertain a motion to approve, or if there are any edits or corrections in the minutes, we can entertain those.
No, Maria sounds good.
I don't think that we
Did you
because,
count that?
we only have 6.
Okay.
Lonnie and Doug.
So we have
Just listening.
13 members, 6 of which count for, so we don't have quorum, so actually can't approve.
It's okay, maybe someone will show up.
I hope. Yeah, because that's going to be a problem for our next item of business. So, with
Did
that,
anybody tell you they weren't coming or working?
yes, I have several folks. So we do have several people who just, one with sick kids, one with childcare, 2 folks are traveling. Those are all I heard.
Okay.
I'm sure Sandy did. All right, then I will request if we could change the orders of the day. We'll move committee business down and the approval of the meeting minutes. If there's no objections, we'll switch that around. Hopefully we get one more person here so we can take on that business. Is there objection? All right, seeing that, we'll change those orders. We'll move directly into our scheduled presentations. We'll start with Emily. Emily and Serena.
Okay. Do you want us anywhere in particular?
Maybe right here.
Do you want to stand?
Oh, in front of where you know,
You could be over by Joe Costa.
yeah, why don't you come over here? Yeah, sorry, I just need to be here because the laptop.
Yeah.
Over here.
You can, I mean, you can stand.
Yeah, no, here, why don't you guys? Chairs.
You guys saw it.
Yeah, that's not where it goes.
Thank you.
I didn't put it in there. Yeah, I know, it was anything.
Cool with that.
Oh, here. It's, no,
In there?
it's not in there.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I'm Emily Kilroy, assistant to the county executive, and I'm here with Serena Maria, our public engagement coordinator. For those of you that I don't know, I actually started my job with the county working just with supporting the CCAC. So I am not new to this room or this meeting, but I don't know all of you. Joe invited Serena and I to come be part of this meeting today, following a meeting that we had with all of the chairs of the CACs 2 weeks ago. The reason that we're doing that is, you may or may not know, For the past like 3 or 4-ish years, the community advisory committees have been, the staff liaisons have been sort of out of our community development department as part of the long-range planning team. And that team, really since like January of 2022, has been really focused on the comp plan, which is underway. And that's a huge project. Statutorily, state code requires that this comp plan be updated every 5 years. We don't do an actual like full comprehensive plan update every 5 years. There's tweaks that are done at least every 5 years, but we do a more comprehensive sort of opening of the plan. Depending on what's going on in the community, it can be 10 to 15 years apart. So the current plan is from 2015. Here we are in 2022, working on a new one that we hope will be adopted in 2024. And so it's a multi-year project. It's a big overhaul. It's a big community-driven process. And so staffing capacity to do all the CAC work and some other long-range planning work at the same time that you're trying to do a full comprehensive plan update can be a real challenge. And so the Board of Supervisors, as part of the budget process this year, approved 2 temporary positions to help do the sort of backfill the CAC staff liaison role that'll be in the Communications and Public Engagement division, which is part of the County Executive's Office. So that's where we work. The CAC's staff liaison role has been in community development before. It's been in the Communications Office before. I think there's been benefits to both models. I'm excited to sort of bring it back to my office. I think a lot of the work that you do is land use related, but a lot of the work and interests that you have are not. So parks and recreation, economic development, there's a lot of really exciting things going on in the community, and I think one of the benefits of having in the communications office is we work with staff across the organization regularly to sort of know what's going on so that we can do communications and public engagement on it. And so I'm excited about the shift. We've got 2 staff coming on board. Their first day will be later this month. And they'll be reporting to Serena. And so we'll be working with them in November and December and ongoing to onboard them to the organization and to really make sure that they are in the know about what's going on so that they can do a really good job helping, again, with the staff liaison role for the CACs, in addition to some other responsibilities. This year, you all have had, if you've been a CAC member for a while, you know that there's been sort of a modified agenda plan for the year that's been a little bit more structured than usual. So every other month, there's a development review community meeting, if there are any that need to happen. And then in the other month, there's sort of a deep dive on a topic like Parks and Rec. I think Kevin McDermott, who was here, talking about transportation. And that's been an adjustment for you all for sure. The idea is that moving forward, with the extra staff capacity that you guys will sort of return to what you are more used to, which is sort of what does the community want to hear about, and how can we support that. And so we're looking forward to having those staff liaisons sort of at your meeting starting in January. Before we do that, before we sort of dive into sort of back to normal business, what we wanted to do was spend a little bit of time just sort of checking in with the CACs. And so so I mentioned we had a meeting with all the chairs. That was sort of the first step, just to sort of check in with them, to see, from your perspective, chairs have a little bit more interaction with staff on a regular basis, hear from the chairs sort of what's going on, what's working well, what's not working so well, there's some things that I hope the county could do a little bit differently moving forward. And then what we want to do is sort of have a similar conversation with the broader CAC members in the January-February timeframe. So Serena will talk a little bit more about that. But that is sort of really driven by both the staffing changes, but also just recognizing that the pandemic was hard for a lot of reasons. And it was a very quick shift into virtual meetings. Some folks feel like it was a very quick shift out of virtual meetings over the past couple months back to return to in-person. And so I think whenever you have a lot of changes coming and sort of happening to you, it's helpful to just have a quick conversation on sort of, what other opportunities are there to make adjustments with so much other stuff sort of up in the air. So we really do want to hear from you starting in January about, your specific thoughts on that. We have the chair's perspective. We'd love to hear from everybody else as well. And I think, Joe invited us here today really just sort of to talk about that and to make that connection. And I hope that you hear from us just our commitment to this work, these bodies. I think community advisory committees are a really great way to hear from the community how the county can be working better. And I think it's a good opportunity for us to sort of share with you what we are doing, and also give some context to why some things are harder and longer and more expensive than they may appear at face value. So I really believe in the work that you all do, and I'm really grateful for your service, and I hope that you'll trust us along the way as we make this transition over the next couple of months. And we want to hear from you. We want to continue to be really engaged. And I appreciate the invitation this evening. And I've said a lot. I'm going to let Serena say some things.
Yeah. So one thing that Emily didn't mention, she said that the positions are temporary. They're 3-year positions, so it's not going to be kind of an in and out situation. We're hoping that starting now and going into the future that we can build relationships, not only with the CACs, but with the greater community, really looking at this as an opportunity to have a wider opportunity for public engagement. So, and really having a driving force be the CACs, because you know your community best. How best is it to go out into the community and ask questions and receive feedback and learn about what's going on. So something that we're really excited about is how we share information. Each CAC is different, each little community is different, but there are a lot of similar interests. So how we kind of can create structures of information that like reference libraries that everyone can find. We have our website, but we also know that it's not the easiest way to access information. So holding presentations and having videos and really digging into kind of plain English, common language approaches to projects is something that our team is going to be really dedicated to, and really understanding what those information needs are would be kind of coming from you all. So that we can start to develop the languages that our community needs to hear in normal terms, not just legalese. So I don't know, are we in a position to ask questions today? Or?
No, Joe, where do you want us to go?
Well, I know your last meeting was you talked about vision and what I imagine your hopes for going forward. So without the meeting notes being approved yet, is this something we can dive into and maybe share the highlights?
Yeah, right. And I think so just to clarify, right? I mean, just the timing, right? We had our last meeting in October, and at that meeting, we didn't have anything else on the agenda, so we took the opportunity to check in and see how things were going and what the CAC was doing well, what we felt was working, and things that we could sort of improve internally going forward, areas, whether it was how our agendas were structured or topics going forward. And then I met with the other CAC chairs and Serena to talk about this new staffing model. And so I thought this would be a nice just opportunity for you to kind of hear, because some of that information got filtered, through me to you guys. Some of those same topics came up in terms of what was working well, but I thought this would be a good opportunity to, number one, share what you just shared. So I think what I heard both in the CAC meeting and tonight reiterated is, we're going to have dedicated liaison support, again, which has been really helpful. I'll tell you, from my perspective as a chair, this has been a little, I don't know if tumultuous is the right word. It's just been very kind of fragmented. It's been very unclear in terms of what is the responsibility of the chair versus the staff, and who's setting up the meetings, or who's picking the agenda, and who's getting, it's been, and that's understandable given everything's gone. And then when Rachel left too, that kind of threw another wrinkle into it. So I think from my perspective, helping to organize the meetings, I think having a dedicated person again is going to be really nice, who's more available. I'm not sure if it came up, but I want to assure everybody that when we do have although the staffing is going to go from planning to community outreach,
Communications and public
Communication.
engagement.
public engagement. We still, whenever we have public meetings, we are still going to have planning staff.
Yes.
Right, so that was one concern that we had was, well, are we going to have people that actually know about the projects and stuff? Yes, whenever we have an official public meeting, we will have staff here. And I guess one of the things we'll have to work out too is, I guess when we have those dedicated presentations, whether it's from Kevin or Parks or whatever, we'll have the relevant staff here. So I don't think that we're going to lose anything in terms of, knowledge about the projects or making sure that it's not just a game of telephone, right? I think that was one of our concerns was we don't want to have this extra layer of us talking to public engagement, then going to the planners talking to the board. We're just having this, it's much easier when we have the people working on it here. But I don't think that's a concern of this model. I think we're just going to have good support. I think it's where I see it. So, but I think from our perspective, what I was hoping to get tonight was before these people are on board, before they come in and get started, maybe some things that you can pass on to them straight from us and say, hey, these are the things that the CACs are working on. These are the things that the CACs want to do with you or need your help with. So, I mean, I can start, and then if there are other people that have things that you want to share, I mean, from my perspective, one thing that's been super helpful, even just like small things you mentioned, like communications and data storage and archives. I mean, little things like Dave was super helpful this month in hyperlinking the minutes and here's the policy. I don't recall if that's always been done, but it just seemed a lot more seamless now, like getting those agendas uploaded. They looked more like what you'd see from the board, right? Like here's all the information in one place. Like you click here and you get everything. So I think that that's one place we could improve, and maybe the liaison, since they have a little more focus on that, I assume they would be able to have a little more capacity to deal with that. And we might even be able to work with them more directly in terms of the website, how are things laid out, or how are things stored or archived. I think would be super helpful.
Absolutely. What other concerns or ideas do you all have?
I'll say as a new member, it would be nice, I've received zero training on just how to operate and just point of rules and things like that. It would be nice to have sort of a more formal kind of onboarding procedure.
Absolutely.
Can I ask, show of hands, Costas, you've been here a long time, I know you've got it. But some of the newer folks, did you receive onboarding when you, no, okay. So we'll probably, once we get a program back up, we used to have one. Once we have it back up, we'll probably invite folks who aren't new but maybe didn't get onboarding to come if you would like to.
Is there a timeline, do you think, for that, or is it?
Certainly by the spring, I think we could get the old materials dusted off and start making invitations.
Yeah, it might make sense to go and have it coincide with the new members. The newer
So-
event, 'cause it's not- 'cause
So
they're
yeah, so
staggered.
they're staggered throughout. So we used to do, so the 7 CACs have 4 months of the year where appointments are sort of calendared around, and so we would do, we used to do an orientation session that would, so it would have, I think Crozet and Pantops are on the same schedule. So we'd have members from all those committees come, and we would do sort of an overview of the master plan, and we kind of break up into small groups and have sort of a more focus on Crozet and then more focus on Pantops when we got to the actual master plan piece.
Well, you could always do like a podcast or something like that. This is what you watch. I mean, I think the biggest one that we've run into consistently is reply alls.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the challenges.
Reply alls.
When somebody gets reply all, taking an email to go down.
Yeah, it is a little concerning that new members aren't up to date with lawyer rules, because I remember the lawyer talking to us when I was onboarded.
So, just a question for kind of staff. I know when I was on Stormwater Conservation District Director, we just used the state training. And there's a great online state FOIA training that's by the, I was just I wonder if that link can be distributed.
Yeah.
So people can just do that virtually, just do the state training on FOIA, because I found it extremely helpful as a district director.
Yeah.
Because I remember you used to get disclosure, you have to disclose and stuff.
We still get, I mean, I got that this year.
Did you? I don't know if it's an annual thing, but this one last year or something.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in that state training that I think a lot of people, which surprises them.
From your last meeting, did you have particular topics that you're kind of interested in pursuing or learning more about?
Yeah, let me pull up what these minutes. Certainly, I think one thing that we appreciated was having the regular updates on certain areas, so transportation, parks, probably something else we could do. But having, and even if we make them sort of a tradition, we sort of memorialize them that March is this, or September maybe it's pegged to the something in the schedule, or it's before smart scale time, whatever it is. Like if we could find some schedule that works, and then we just sort of have it as a tradition or whatever that becomes, and that helps us, I think, as a committee become a little more regimented. And hey, we've got to prepare for this. Because one thing that people, I think Valerie brought this up last meeting was, our real one of our key roles is really holding people's feet to the fire. I mean, to stay on top of the implementation, right? Especially now that we're between master plans, right? So we're really switching into implementation. What can we do to push and stay up on implementation? And so seeing where those projects are, seeing what is coming down the pipe or where the hangups are is really helpful and valuable work.
Yeah, and so the liaison role is coming into our office, but we're not cut off from CDD or parks or the other departments. In fact, we'll have regular check-ins post-meeting, so we are getting all the questions answered. We're staying up to date on what the concerns are. So, and when needed, CDD staff is certainly, and other staff are certainly available to come to meetings as needed. So I just want to, we're not going to have like the planning expertise as a liaison, but we have that relationship in the organization, and we'll work together to get all your answers to the table. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so you said this is a 3-year position that you're filling. Why would anybody want to work for the county with low levels of compensation and benefits for a job that's not permanent? It's an entry-level job. I'm going to get my foot in the door and I can get out as soon as I can. And I hope the county would value the CAC more than just giving us a turnover employee every couple of years. It shows a little bit of disrespect.
I mean, I certainly appreciate the feedback on that. And the grading of the positions are sort of on par with the grading of a position that has been in the staff liaison role. So certainly it's not at any sort of like disadvantage from a compensation and benefits standpoint.
Yeah, but the county underpays its employees probably like 15 to 25% compared to the market.
Actually, we have a comprehensive compensation and benefits study underway right now that we should be getting the results back for this winter, and so we'll have a good understanding of where those jobs fall in line with the market from there. But I think what I would want to share is that we're very excited about the folks that we have identified for these positions. I think that you all will be pretty excited about them too. I think, 3 years for someone that's looking for the stability of I think when you think about government employees, you think about folks who are interested in that 20-year, 30-year commitment of service. I think the reality is when you look at how long the average employee stays in a job these days, 3 years actually is not a bad commitment. Certainly, we hope that the model will be successful and that it won't necessarily have to remain temporary, but as it was funded, it was sort of a backfill. So while we have the long-range planning folks working on the comp plan, which is about a 2.5, 3-year project, having a backfill position. And so from a budgetary standpoint, it's sort of more of a neutral commitment. But again, I think we're very hopeful that there'll be some good support for the model, and that, that we may be having a different conversation in a couple of years, but for now, it's sort of that it's sort of an offsetting function. And again, I think you all are going to be very pleased with who we'll be introducing soon.
Yeah, and I'll just say, you know, coming from the role of the chair, I'm actually really heartened to hear this. I've actually felt kind of the opposite, which was being at the mercy of the planning staff, right? Because, so, you know, the planning staff folks were doing double duty, right? They were doing their day jobs of planning and writing comp plans, and writing master plan, and then like moonlighting with us and trying to like coordinate, like, you know, Rachel Falconsky, where I'm like, she's, you know, writing the comp plan, the master plan of the day, but she's also fielding my emails to like set up speakers and come here and sit through these meetings. And so, and now like when she left, now working with Dave Bennett, who's wonderful. Dave is great, but he's got a full-time job already, and he's, you know, working as a planner during the day. He's doing his day job. And so it felt sometimes like, you know, it wasn't like I felt guilty, but I feel like we weren't getting kind of, you know, full service, right? We were sort of taking the sort of crumbs that they could offer as they're busy. So actually, I think from my perspective, I'm really heartened to hear that there are going to be people who one of their like primary roles is in this role. I think it's going to make our relationship a lot more productive in these committees. So I feel like better. When we went to that meeting and we heard that this is the new plan, I actually felt better about kind of the board of supervisors. It made me feel like the board is actually taking the CACs more seriously. I would have felt a little bit worse if they would just continue to prod along and say, yeah, you guys just talk to the planners when they have a few free minutes here and there. Yeah, you take the leftovers, you know, they'll get to you when they get to you. That felt like a bit more of an afterthought. This feels like it's a much more proactive thing. And it's only it is a 3-year position, but my understanding too is that will allow to kind of reassess, right, as the comp plan gets through. One of the ideas is maybe to reassess and see if that model's working, or to see if at that point it reverts back to planning staff. I thought that was one of the ideas at that point. Once the comp plan is finished, then maybe it goes back to that planning when they're not quite as busy, they might have more capacity. So, totally understand that concern. I think it's actually less of a concern. So, I feel better. Because it came up last meeting, that was another thing we talked about was, and I brought up in the meeting, was how the board feels about the CACs. And this actually feels like kind of an investment or a commitment to the CACs, which is something that I know a lot of us have not always felt. So, other questions, concerns? I mean, I want to make sure that we funnel things up, but also just to hear the plan. I know it's been, and my apologies, like I know, you know, from you all and from me, it has felt these last few months have been kind of in flux a little bit. But part of what I want to do is let you guys know and let you talk to Emily and Serena and see, like, there is a plan. So starting in January, I think we'll be in a really good position to kind of hit the ground running and like start off the new year on a really strong footing.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I really appreciate that, and we're not going to just sort of parachute the new folks in alone in January. So I also want to know that we've got a commitment to, like, we're going to do some really focused onboarding with them, sort of in the daylight hours in November and December, and then also work really hard to support them in their first couple of months of sort of service in a liaison role, so that you don't feel like you've been handed folks who don't have more than 6 weeks of training, because they won't at that point. And again, to just keep a good dialogue going, you know, I think primarily probably through Joe, but you know, any of you at any point can reach out and say, you know, this isn't going well, or, you know, here's how we can get some better service. So, so I hope that that you feel like, you know, this is sort of an ongoing, like, there's going to be a transition, yes, but our hope is that we make it a really smooth one, and we want to hear from you throughout.
You mentioned the website, and did y'all recently change like all the back-end architecture? You can read Jim's website, you link to various county websites, and it brings up broken links when you navigate down on your phone. Like if you go from the board over to the CAC, the links are broken. So I'm hoping maybe you all could address some of the website challenges. And like if you search on the webpage, like Community Crozet Master Plan, it doesn't even show up except for the 2010 plan. There's just a lot of problems with the website.
If you had specific examples that you could share with us, it's hard to kind of run down.
Heartbeat.
Great.
concerns, things that we need to show the folks that we're bringing on, they need to be aware of, you think, before they, as they're getting to speed on the CAC?
I'd kind of be curious to see what your onboarding is for their staff. To see what they're being called.
Yeah,
Did you say,
So we can guide them.
did you say how many there are?
2. I mean, I don't have like, I have.
Not now. I mean, 8 o'clock would be great. No, I mean, I think that knowing what they're being coached and guided on would be instructive for us to see.
Well, that's part of what I was hoping to have here, right? Is that some of what we say is part of the onboarding, right? It's like, here's what you're walking into. That's, you know, I think this is part of our opportunity to tell them, like, here's what we want from you. I mean, now how much of that actually gets through or whatever, I'm not teaching you as a censor, but like, you know, I mean, how much that gets through, but I think this is our chance to like, they need to know this. They
Yeah, I
need to
mean,
know
do you
this.
have, I mean, is there something on your mind that you know, you
There's
wish?
so much of them. Yeah, I think that, to Joe's point earlier, I think that having a monthly, a quarterly update as to what projects have been submitted. Which ones are where we stand on smart scale funding, where we stand on like Eastern Avenue. I know it's never going to happen, but just, just we can have that conversation. But I think in particular, like new developments, what's being proposed, what's being rejected, what the comments are, just getting a sense of what that stuff is. And to the website, it's a disaster. I just looked for CCAC and came up with an agenda from 6 years ago. But that's a whole nother conversation as far as it's always been bad. But I think that just helping this new staff help us know more, so we can talk to people about what's going on in Crozet, and also so we can just be better at what we do.
Yeah, one of the things we might be able to do a better job too of is, Jim mentioned, like I feel like even when we're looking at implementation, we often look at like what's going on in this round of Smart Scale, right, or what's coming up like next month. And I always think about how long the timeline is on the CIP or the school long-range planning. Like I remember, when the Crozet school funding was going, right? I remember I went to some of those meetings that we talked about here, we had a resolution, everything, and I just remember reflecting on, Jill, I think this is what I wrote for your blog, I wrote about, I mean, it was, it was like, look, because we were here, we were talking like, hey, let's all go to the meeting and say that we should support this for the Crozet. It's like, well, if you really wanted to make sure that project got funded, you needed to show up, not last month, not the month before, you needed to be here like 3.5 years ago, right? Like when that long-range plan was being drafted, like that was the time you needed to come and say that we need a new Crozet school. It was about 4 years ago, right? So I think that's maybe something we do is that longer range. I was like, hey, CIP is coming around for the next 5-year cycle, and just being aware of when those meetings are or when those the working groups are and things, so that we can be aware of and say, look, I know that it's too late in the day to ask for Eastern Ave funding this year, but like we want something 6 years from now. What is it that we could be going to the CIP working group or whatever and saying, hey, in 5 years, this is where we. That's easy to get lost in the shuffle, but I think that may actually be a role too that we can play.
Yeah, that's very cool.
And it's just so hard, and it's hard for us to keep track because if you don't have a specific project in mind, like you're not going to go to the CIP, you're not going to go to the School Long Range Plans Commission with something from 7 years from now. But if we are aware of it and say, hey, this meeting is getting off the ground, I think that might allow us to have a conversation and sort of advocate for some things there.
Speaking of the website, are you guys still using the development dashboard that Andrew Newpol started several years ago?
Yeah, my understanding is that when Andrew left, he was that was sort of a project that was his kind of creation.
Yeah, it was cool.
I know. It was.
So I guess I would add that to the list if there's a way to resurrect that. I liked where that was going. For those of you who don't know, it had all the housing developments in a like
database thing where you could see how many were approved, how many were being built, and what stage of the approval process they were all in. So it was kind of cool.
Was this Andrew in GIS or?
He was with,
Planning. He was in long range planning.
What was the last name?
Newpol?
with a K.
He left a year.
Actually, a year and a half, right, year and a half, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It was before COVID.
It was BC.
Yeah, and I think one thing that you guys already did, and this is something that came up in the minutes, is just the coordination among CACs and the chairs. And, I think that was super helpful, me sitting in and just talking, even just the ideas of sharing how they conduct their meetings, how they conduct their business. I think we all operate a little bit differently. And so I think that's very helpful just to get ideas and to share things. So, I hope obviously that's something that the liaisons can help with. And I hope, both in terms of getting us together and chairs.
Yeah. Yeah, that, several years ago, we had quarterly chair meetings where all the chairs could get together and sort of talk about, again, tell the county what's going well, what's not going well, and learn from each other. It was a really good opportunity for folks to just sort of hear, oh, we all have an issue with this one thing, or, someone would come and say, I really feel like we need to be working on this, and others would say, that's great. That's not a priority for us, but that's a priority for you, and we support you in that. And so it's been a fun exchange of just information. Those conversations guided the joint, we used to do once or twice a year a joint all CAC meeting. And so those conversations would help guide that. The chairs would help us figure out what are the topics that would be most timely. And if you've been here a while, you may or may not remember, we had like a CIP prioritization process one year at the joint CAC meeting. So we put the CACs in the board's seat to try to figure out how do you, with limited funding, how do you prioritize a lot of the really real needs that we have in a lot of areas. And we got really great feedback on that. So we're hoping to be able to bring back some of that stuff too as part of this.
Yeah, I think it would be really helpful to articulate what the purpose of the CAC is. I can almost guarantee you no one in the community actually knows why they exist. And during COVID, y'all read this long thing as to why you're meeting virtually and all these rules and laws, but no one ever begins a meeting with why the CAC actually exists and the purpose of the CAC. And
on the
also,
CAC webpage, there's actually a fact sheet that has the.
if you can navigate to it, it might be. But also back to the webpage, I think I've articulated a number of times, the county needs to reach out to the city of Roanoke. The geospatial shop in Roanoke is spectacular. The data you can get on their website is phenomenal. It's all geographic information systems. The county needs to invest significantly in the capacity, both staffing and technologically. We're at like 1995 technology.
We actually have underway a community development system overhaul that they are in the very early stages of, but it's going to do a lot of the stuff that I think it'll put us in a better position. I don't know that we'll get exactly back to the development dashboards, but it'll put us in a better position to have that data more readily available, and also tie in some of the geospatial stuff that you're probably looking at. So yes, and thank you.
Yeah, and actually, I was going to tie in on that too. I mean, I really appreciate using the GIS data, but also county view is a disaster. And I know there's a process to get the replacement for county view, but I think it'd be really helpful to have some citizen input on the kinds of features that system should have. I mean, for me, I'm a big believer in open data, and I think, anyway, I'd love to see the ability for us to provide more input on the features that County View has, particularly integration with the GIS system.
Thanks for that feedback.
In the meantime, since we can't snap our fingers and get that website thing, think about ways that, or how, where in the timeline, once an application comes in, could there be some kind of preliminary notice, we've received an application in this site for a minimal amount of information, so that then people like me would be a little prepared when somebody says, oh, have you heard about this new application down the street? I'm going, no. So, also I think it helps for the community to know that something is brewing somewhere, and then they can begin to be tuned in as they drive by and go, oh, I wonder what's going on. And perhaps in several months, when things are actually real and have enough information to be able to share something with some meat on it, then we'll have a larger group of people who are tuned in a little bit.
Thank you all very much, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
so we will look forward to meeting our new liaisons in January, probably.
Yep.
Look forward to seeing them and getting them running.
Awesome. Thank you all for your time. Thank you.
We're actually going to backtrack. Sandy's here, we're going to have a quorum to approve business, so we're going to back up. So let's take care of the things. I'm going to turn the projector back on anyway for our policy, but we'll jump back and approve, entertain a motion maybe to approve the minutes from last time. So were there any corrections or additions or changes to the minutes, or do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Further discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes? Great, minutes are approved. Let's move to our second committee business item, which is our all virtual meeting policy. I'm going to try to pull this up. I emailed it around, but I'll try to pull it up on, there we go. So this, the draft policy, I wish I could take more credit on this, but this was sent to me by county staff. Dave Benish sent this to me. Apparently this was drawn up by the county attorneys. It's largely boilerplate. I guess their thing is they're just making it fill in the blanks that all the virtual advisory committees and committees can adopt this policy. It essentially tracks state law. It kind of fulfills the things. Yes, Tim?
Increase the font size?
Yeah.
You look back and see it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, sure, there we go. How's that? Yeah, so you guys can see, just describes the purpose of the policy, and then all of these virtual meeting requirements, these are basically just track exactly what's in state law. It says in order to conduct virtual meetings, you have to adopt a policy that says this, and this. The county attorney said basically just copy that and said, there you go. I do just want to point to one thing. So Dave, Benish sent this to me. This was just the draft that we got. No substantive changes made. The only thing I will point out is, in terms of kind of substance, in terms of the frequency of our meetings, the way that state law allows us, we can have up to 25% of our annual meetings rounded up to the next number. That tells me we get 3 meetings a year. We'll get 3 virtual meetings a year. We typically meet 11 times, because sometimes we take the summer off, maybe 10. But either way, 2.5 rounds up to 3, so we'll get 3 virtual meetings a year. The only thing is that we can't do it consecutively. So I will say that I think we will have to decide, I think as a committee, we'll have to think about when and how we want to, if we adopt this policy, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but if we adopt this policy, I think we need to think seriously as a committee about when and how we will use that power, knowing that we only get through a year. So, do we use that during June when people are traveling? Do we want to use it when there's a contentious, potentially issue, right? We want to make sure that plenty of people from the community can access it even if they can't come to the library. Do we want to use it when it's a presentation from Kevin McDermott about transportation? We want to make sure that it's recorded and everybody can see it, right? This will be something for the community to decide, is how we want to exercise this power. But I want to also, before we take this up, I want to thank Ann too, because and the entire board for advocating to make this totally irrelevant, ideally, with our local leaders at the state level. And I want to thank her for, I didn't watch it personally, but I read about it. It sounded like the board was very vociferous in its support for the state increasing the number of times that we can use virtual meetings, especially with advisory boards. And I was dismayed to hear that it seemed like we didn't get as much traction on the state level on a bipartisan fashion too. It seemed like there was a lot of pushback on several different reasons. And I'm disappointed at this stage. I just want to sort of register my formal disappointment with our local representatives, not the board, our General Assembly persons, who are not, I think, being very smart here. And they need to expand our access. This is open government, this is accessibility, this is transparency. I think virtual meetings actually improved that quite a bit, which is, I think, something we saw during the pandemic. Sandy?
What reason was given for limiting it to 3, and does this, when it says emergency, state emergencies, I assume that that gives you an extra one if you need it. I'm just thinking about weather as another contingency in which you might suggest an online meeting.
My understanding, and it would have to be a local emergency to be declared by the board, I mean, right? This would be a COVID type
Yes.
emergency or something.
With an ordinance adopted similar to what we did in March of 19,
Because you would,
which allowed all those different operations to happen until 6 months after the emergency was over.
because you have to give notice,
Oh, absolutely.
so you can't do it at the last minute.
Well,
Is
the
there-
notice
there
is 5 days or
provision-
3 days.
Any provisions for hybrid?
No, this doesn't cover, sorry, Ann, you could fill that.
You're right, as far as our outreach, basically the short version of the legislation requested was let the people closest to the residents who can be thrown out if residents don't like it, let them make the decisions about how the structure is, it's going to welcome most people into the meeting. And we are not, as local government is not fabulously thought to be competent by the folks in the General Assembly. And so we need a short leash, and therefore then that doesn't give the residents a leash at all to be able to operate. And I'm hopeful, and I will find out this weekend at the VACO conference, how far abroad from Albemarle County this interest is, because just like the cameras that will be able to send tickets for speed, there is tremendous support all across the Commonwealth for that particular thing. And I'm hoping it will also be for this. And so that will help to overcome some of the hesitancy on the part of our residents. It was interesting that the point was brought up, well, not everybody has good internet, so they won't be able to get there. And my point was, well, not everybody can drive at night, or can leave their babies, or something, in order to come to a meeting in person. So we need to do the best job we can for as many people as we can. And so, anyway, I didn't get anywhere with that, but that was sort of the short version of what happened.
But there's no provision against live streaming. I mean, we could do all our meetings that way, could we not? All the school boards are doing that, the county, I think the county is doing it.
Yes, and for the board level and the planning commission level and the school board level, I think there's participation online at the same time as well, which is wonderful and frightfully expensive. And with the biggest impediment to doing it for all 7 CACs right now is we need about 3 Carolyn Shavers to be able to manage that, because I think there is a commitment on the part of the board of supervisors and staff too, that you don't want to have your online people be treated as second-class citizens. And believe me, I've been there a lot in state meetings where you have to really just sort of be rude and jump in because you'll never get recognized the other way. So I think that we have made a great effort over the last year or so to make sure that people are recognized and admitted and all that kind of thing. But it's hard to run a meeting, as Joe's doing now, and also be watching for people in the waiting room and making sure that people are recognized, et cetera. So it is challenging, but has been, I think, the best survival that we could achieve over the last 2 or 3 years, was being hustled by this.
Yeah, and just one things that came up at other committees I've been a part of. A lot of us have been forced to become experts in Zoom and other streaming technologies ourselves just to do our day jobs. And I just wonder, couldn't the county pursue a volunteer-based approach where, citizens could get some amount of training to lead the virtual part of the meeting themselves? I mean, that would save an enormous amount of staff time and allow, citizens greater access. I mean,
Yeah.
we have a lot of community experts, a lot of people that could lead those meetings now.
Well, we also had dedicated staff as of January, right? That are in the communications department.
Carolyn is in, Carolyn Sharon, who has been doing it,
That's
is
like a
in.
new liaison.
Oh, those folks, yeah. That's an interesting thought, to add that to possibly to their job description.
I mean,
Because that hasn't come up as far as I know, but that's a great idea.
do we all agree that a hybrid meeting is ideal? Or, because the tone of this conversation is making me think that you guys want the opportunity to do more virtual meetings. Whereas I am so glad we're in person. So I.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm an in-person kind of a person too, but for some folks,
Yeah, ideally we
it would be
have
nice if
hybrid.
they could either watch or somehow have awareness,
Yeah.
which there's not a lot of that, right? There's what, 10, 15 people out of our whole community here?
I mean, this is good attendance for our Zoom meetings too, I'd say.
I mean, there were times when there
There
were
were some
50.
nights we had
Yeah,
like
but those were
30 or
important
40
meetings.
people.
Yes.
I mean, if we would have 50 people here if somebody, if it
Yes.
was a development.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about attendance.
Did you see Tim back there? He's-
Tim, yes.
So I was just gonna ask, I know for a while, the Crozet Gazette was live streaming these meetings in this room.
Yes.
And what was there, how many people were checking out the live stream that, while it was happening, which,
Not very many.
right, my sense was it was only less than a handful of people doing that. And then people might watch it later, but
Yeah. Please, and I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
I'm Matt.
Matt.
So like 5 or 6 years ago, Albemarle County asked the Commonwealth of Virginia to change the law to pass a sidewalk clearing ordinance after snowstorms or ice storms. The county has failed to do that in the past 6 years. Why are we asking for something else from the state? Why don't we finish what we did first that is truly an emergency? Because you talked about not being able to drive at night. Well, people could walk here if we had sidewalks and bike lanes and trails. And we should follow through on what we asked for first before we ask for something else.
Thank you, Matt. Is there any other discussion or conversation about the policy? Because this came from the county attorney, I don't feel we have any liberty to amend it or change it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care about any virtual meetings, so like, I don't know if I'm the only one.
So here's my take would be, let's move, if there's no further discussion, we'll move into a vote on the policy. And then I do think we need a discussion perhaps in January or something about how and if we want to use this content. So let's give ourselves the ability to do it, and then we can decide later as a group when and how we'd like to exercise that. Okay? So, if somebody would like to move the draft policy that we adopted?
Sure.
Thanks, Sandy. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jim. All right.
For discussion real quick, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that having all virtual was fantastic, but also recognize the value of this. But I think that it should be either or. I think the hybrid, I think that picking in January and June, we can do all virtual. It's hard enough to get people to show up to this, much less telling people, oh no, this month is virtual. We get 4 people show up in June for a meeting here and it's virtual. They're never gonna come back. So I mean, just my 2 cents that, we do it in person, we do it all virtual until we successfully integrate hybrid, which isn't going to happen until we money or staff. I'm in favor of it.
Okay. All right, well then we'll move it directly into a vote on policy. All in favor of adopting the virtual meeting policy? Opposed? All right, so that was, what, so 7, that was 6 in favor and 1 opposed.
But not a majority. Because you don't have all the members.
no, they do now, just barely.
But you,
We have
They just barely cleared 50%.
okay, so
Let's do matter on our
Oh, come
committee.
on now.
I mean,
Sorry, we have,
sorry,
we
they
have
do.
13 appointed members, we have a quorum of 7, which is here.
We have
and
8,
vote was-
because Sean got.
Oh, 8, sorry, so it was, 7. There's one no vote, right?
I'm
7.
saying, yeah, policy.
Yeah.
Oh,
You're
that's
abstaining?
the-
Oh, I'm sorry, abstention. 6 to 1 with 1 abstention. Okay, so the policy is adopted. We have a virtual meeting policy. That brings me to another thing that we need to think about, which is our December meeting. Another piece of committee business here. We may not have a December meeting, so I was communicating with Dave Benish. There was a proposal that was submitted, a land use proposal regarding the mobile home park over by the Crozet Park. They will need a public meeting at some point, but he doesn't know if they would like to do that in December or possibly in January. So we might hold off and do that in January. So he said if they don't need to do that in December, then I would maybe suggest that we don't hold that December meeting.
Sorry, who is it? Who needs to?
It's the mobile home park over by Crozet Park.
Okay.
They submitted a land use application.
Let me make one more. 80 units instead of 75 or 87.
I think it's, yeah, a slight increase. Yeah, the application that's submitted, it's a slight increase in the number of units they would have there. And I think, you know, I can be in touch with you all, but, you know, our meeting this year would fall really late, just by the way the calendar falls. Our December meeting would be December 14th, which is starting to get into travel and holiday season and all that. So I could be in touch with you all. But just want to put it out there, we may not end up having this.
Let's not meet in December, it's motion.
Yeah, all right. People feel good about this kind of
You
meeting.
got a second?
Well, so then this is another thing. So this is potentially, because now that we have our virtual meeting policy, I told Dave that it's a possibility if they needed to hold that meeting, it might be possible to hold that meeting virtually. Right, we could do that now that we have our policy. That might be an opportunity, and it would not count against our 3 because the 3 is measured per calendar year. And so we would actually be able to hold a meeting in December and then we'd start fresh. Although we couldn't hold a virtual meeting in January, but we'd start fresh with 3 virtual meetings as of June.
When do you have to announce it? 14 days, is it?
Yeah, I forget exactly what the state law requires. It does have to provide a notice. I don't know if it actually has a minimum number of days. Sorry, it has a minimum number of days if you change. So if you have to do, if you decide to change from in-person to virtual, you have to like send a new notice. I don't think it actually says in here. It just says an indication of whether the meeting will be in person or virtual must be included in the meeting notice. So whenever that meeting, I
Which
think that's
should be
only
3 days.
3
3
days.
days. Okay, yes,
Business
that's,
days.
oh, sorry, 3 days, yeah. Yeah, whatever the standard meeting notice is, we just have to put
3
it.
business
It's
days.
3 business days,
3 business days.
so for us, it's Friday.
Right, yeah, so that's pretty short notice, we can get that out. Matt?
I'm sorry, I'm just confused. Did y'all vote on a draft policy?
Well, no, it's draft, meaning this is the draft because we haven't adopted it yet, so now that it's approved, we can remove draft and it is now the approved policy.
So it wasn't a draft from the lawyers, what you're saying? I thought you had said this was a draft proposed by the county's attorney.
Sorry, 2 different words. It was drafted by the lawyers. Yes, the county attorney drafted the policy. We did not write it ourselves, correct? It was given to us by the county attorneys. Yeah, and assured that that would comply with state law. So that's why we adopted it. All right. Very briefly, Terry, before we move to the Trails Crew, I did just want to give, because we also did jump over announcements. I know one thing we talked about is moving the announcements up a little bit, so we don't always wait in the end. And I don't know if you had any announcements or updates you wanted to share, maybe from the board's perspective, anything?
Where we have been with the upcoming budget season is that the strategic plan was updated and adopted last month, and then that leads into the 5-year financial plan and the long look at beginning to prioritize investments to carry out the strategic plan. And from that, we'll begin the development of a proposed budget, which is released by the county executive in early February. So right now, departments are submitting needs, requests, agencies outside who do local government work. Think of JABA and the senior center providing services for our seniors. We don't have a Department of Senior Living. We have these 2 agencies who receive some county money, but also leverage that county money with tremendous outside funding. So those kinds of materials are being collected now and will be used by the staff in the preparation of the budget. So a lot of our most recent meetings have been about those topics. And the update I have on the stream assessment for Montclair is that there is an appeal period at which the landowner applicant could choose or may not to appeal the determination of the program authority, which is a fancy word for the engineer, and to the chief of the department in the county. And I have no idea whether that will happen, but basically everything is waiting until that. And then there will be more considerations. There are ongoing work in several different departments about how to improve processes and different approaches to solve some of these problems that will hopefully prevent these kinds of occurrences where there is federal law on one side, state law on another side, and the county's somewhere in between without as much authority as it might need. And sorting all that out has been a real problem. So I cannot give a complete statement right now about that, but I do know that there are lots of experienced minds working on this. And through the winter, there will be a public engagement process about the next phase of the implementation of the stream health, which takes care of, which focuses, number one, on sediment and the control of sediment, EMS. Aggregation of different efforts on a project into one application, so therefore it qualifies for those kinds of permits. And some higher level things that are going on to do a different approach that would solve some of these problems. But I will definitely have more details about all of that as they become available, because I don't want to stumble and give everybody the wrong impression about something. So I'm trying to keep it at the 30,000 square foot height, 30,000 foot level right now.
Square feet, you're thinking
Yes.
disturbances and buffers.
Yeah,
Square feet. Yeah, Matt?
Yeah, has the county brought in outside counsel to investigate whether any ethical standards were violated with the whole stream situation in that development, and to provide the community a timeline as to what happened and why it happened the way it did?
That is also, the determination for an outside person was to evaluate the streams.
Right, but
So- There is
how
not-
it got to that point, would the county consider bringing in an outside counsel to ensure there were no ethical standards violated by county employees?
There was an investigation within the county, but I do not think an outside person was brought in.
Is that public information?
I do not have it, so I can't share anything I don't have, but,
Yeah. I'm good at that.
To Emily.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that as we go forward, that's one thing I know that we heard from ourselves and from Eric Schmitz and other people is, one, there's obviously the substance of the stream issue, but then the whole procedure and the TikTok and the timeline of what happened. And I think a lot of us are still committed to wanting to know what happened there and how that all went in. I still don't feel like I know what happened and who did what and why. Tim, I've never gotten a clear answer of that, and I would just love to have a very clear timeline of who did what and why. Tim?
I just wanted to add to the discussion that the Crozet Community Association will meet tomorrow night at 7:30 at the Crozet Park Community Building, and our presentation is by Eric Schmidt of Crozet United about Montvale Stream and the determination letter. So if you want more background and are interested in this topic, come to our meeting tomorrow night.
Thank you.
7, what time?
7:30.
Okay.
The easy place to find the agenda is crozetcommunity.org, which you'll have to scroll past this agenda to get to tomorrow night's agenda.
Just be very careful if you walk to the park. The county refuses to acknowledge those sidewalks, and it's a very dangerous sidewalk in that street. So the county encourages you to walk in the middle of the road.
And I'll just add one update, which I'm not sure if I mentioned here, but I know Ann is probably aware, so I talked with her a little bit about it. The View, everyone's a popular development around here. A few months ago, I drove by, I was expressing concern that there were no trees at the View. There's supposed to be trees. Their approved site plan calls for 61 trees of various sizes to be planted, and they have planted 0 in 2 years since they opened.
Good catch.
Well, fortunately, I wasn't the first one. I raised it. I emailed people at Ann and people at the code enforcement. They were already aware of it. Apparently, they've been trying for some time. I was told last month that October 31st was the deadline that the owners had promised to put those trees in. They did not. And I got a call from Jay in code enforcement, who very helpfully said that as soon as they did not meet that deadline, they immediately sent a notice of violation. And apparently they're hoping that that has got the owner's attention, because the owners have now claimed that they are promising to get those trees in this month. That was what he was informed. So
November is the perfect time.
I'm not sure.
See one trees.
Actually,
January.
is there a penalty?
Is there a penalty that's imposed for failing to live up to your site plan?
There certainly can be. I mean, that, I don't know all the ins and outs, but Jay was saying that if they're not, if they don't get done what they're supposed to do this month, then the county can go forward with remedies. And I don't know if you have any.
I think they have bonds for the trees, so that is one avenue there. One of the sources of frustration on the part of many citizens is that in zoning, the enforcement is based upon notice of violation, what seems like endless appeals. Meet the compliance a little bit, and then it starts all over again, to the point where different issues go on for years. And staff then spends a lot of time going to court, and a lot more time waiting to get to court, and then waiting to get a decision from court. I mean, literally, it took 10 years for a non-compliant business out in Boonesville to finally get wrapped up. And I don't want anybody to ever have to wait that long. And a lot of situations, people feel like it's neighbor against neighbor, and that is a really awful situation for any local government to have.
So what did the residents want, the trees?
Oh,
That
yes.
seem like-
Oh, this is not neighbor against neighbor.
Right.
That was
So
something
it seems
different
like
altogether.
it should be fairly straightforward.
Oh, it absolutely should, but the way, it's an incredibly cumbersome delivery system for zoning issues, period. And that is just the way it is right
And
now.
who is the developer of that property?
It's
Pinnacle.
Pinnacle?
Park.
And William Park is the owner. Who? William Park. I know it's is it Pinnacle really? Okay, it is. Okay, we asked.
Lonnie?
No, yes, I was just gonna say, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too far, but I will say that I hope that at some point, sooner rather than later, Elmore County establishes a tree commission like Charlottesville has, and that we come up with better standards for trees. We haven't even approved the new plant list that the National Heritage Committee recommended that encourages planting native plants, so that we're still planting invasive species in Elmore County. There's some things too that I have concerns about. There's diminishing returns on the heights of trees. It may seem like a good idea to put in a full-grown tree, but from a horticultural perspective, if you plant a small tree and you plant one that's twice as tall next to it, the small tree will outgrow the larger tree over a certain number of years because it's healthier and less damage to the roots. So I think there's things like that, having a tree commission of citizens who can provide advice on things like this and some level of oversight of what's going on with some of these tree plantings, I think would be extraordinarily helpful.
And we don't have an ordinance yet, am I right?
A tree ordinance?
Yeah.
There is a stipulation about tree cover that is lower than it could be as far as our state authority is concerned. So that is definitely something that has been discussed, I think, as part of our stream health thing that is actually in the adopted strategic plan and in the work plan. So that is something that I take reassurance from, is that it's not something that we have to fight to get into either of those documents. So that's a big step forward.
But also we need ordinance to identify trees of significance that should be protected, as the Charlottesville has.
All right. Thank you all for that. Terry, you want to call it the Trails crew?
I want to hear from Terry, but I do want to just clarify with the virtual meetings, like, we're going to talk about what we're actually going to do
Yeah,
in
yes, I
January?
think, that's so we adopt a policy which allows us to do it, but doesn't force us to do it.
Yeah.
My plan would be, I think, January, depending on obviously like what kind of meetings, next time we have a little bit of time, I want to carve out 15 or 20 minutes where we can talk about this and figure out how and if we want to wield that power.
Okay.
I think, yeah, probably January is the logical one.
Okay.
He promises me my presentation works on the
Oh,
same
okay.
computer. I know. Open. Oh, yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, well, thank you. I think the last time I was here was like 4 or 5 years ago, so there's probably very few of you who remember anything I said. So I'm going to do a little bit about who we are and what we've done recently, and then what we hope to be doing coming up. So we'll start. So basically, we're just people in the community. We don't have any particular technology information or knowledge about how to build trails or whatever. We get out there, work with the county Parks and Rec people, and build trails and try to keep them open. Let's see. We try to put things on the trail that make them easier or more pleasant to use. We had a Girl Scout troop who got irritated that Boy Scouts do all the building, and they thought girls should do some building, so they built some boardwalks and benches for us. We have this one young man who goes around about once a year and cleans off all of our wayfinding signs. So we do try to put signs out so people know where the trails are. We put bridges and benches and whatnot to make them easier to use. We work with Crozet Park and do projects in the park, and we also do projects at Beaver Creek and Mid Springs. Back the first month of COVID, I'll never forget, we built this amphitheater out at Mid Springs. We started pleasantly and ended up wearing masks, but we did get that built. But so we worked a lot with them. The county Parks and Rec folks use their mowers to mow the big trails that they can get to. So the smaller trails we do with like push mower lawnmowers, and the big ones the county does. We try to help Crozet people appreciate our greenway. We do once or twice a year, we'll do a guided trail walk. We've been working with the Charlottesville area tree stewards to identify significant trees on the trails and put signs up and benches and whatnot for those. That's my favorite tree, I love that tree. It's over by Worcester Ridge. So those are the kinds of things we do. Nothing particularly hard. You all know this. This is our master plan. You've been seeing this a lot. This is where we have trails in place, okay? What we've done so far. Some of the things we've worked on in the last few years. Over here is at Creekside. We put in this piece of trail that goes from this road up to Jarman's Gap. So we now have this trail all the way up to Jarman's Gap, so it's just across the street from Gray Rock. We had some help from the Blue Ridge Home Builders Association. Did a volunteer project one weekend. They sent their guys out and they built this big stairway for us and put gravel on the thing. It was a bigger project than we could do with our shovels and hammers. They've got equipment. They came and did that. It was great. It's fun. One of the projects we did was actually from the master plan we just finished over here at Crozet Park on the very east side. We put in a new connection to Myrtle Street there. So it was just a little dirt path through the bushes, and now we have a gravel paved path, and it makes an official connection there from that neighborhood over to the park. Over here at Westlake, where there's been a lot of new houses and new cul-de-sacs put up, there's places at the bottom of these cul-de-sacs where there are retention ponds. We've extended trails all the way down from those neighborhood streets to the Crozet Connector Trail, so people in the neighborhood can get over there. Here to the left, you'll see that's Chesterfield Landing. At the bottom is Sparrow Hill. When Chesterfield Landing went in, they built a trail there, and then the green spot is county property that was given when Sparrow Hill was developed. We made that trail across that piece of Sparrow Hill. Keep track of that little missing part, because we're going to come back to where those little green dots are in a few minutes. That trail, if you haven't been out there, you get on the trail at Chesterfield Landing and walk down there, I think it's probably the prettiest place on our whole greenway. It's definitely worth a walk.
Yeah, is where you park at
You park in
Anderson's Corner
Chesterfield
there?
Landing
In
on the,
Chesterfield Landing,
yep,
okay.
on the street, right, there's a sign, there are signposts. This at the bottom here is Brownsville and Henley schools, and there is a trail that goes behind the school, from the meadows basically over to Old Trail Drive. That trail happens to be on school property. We had a workday project with I'm going to say PTA, which isn't the right word, but with the parent, teachers, whoever, the week before school started, this last August, and cleared the trail back. We had a bunch of kids, we had parents. The teachers like this trail because it's on school property and they can take the kids out for walks on the trail without making it a field trip, all right? So,
No permission slips required.
because they're still on school property. There's actually an outside classroom that had been built years ago, I think. This past winter, a huge tree smashed right across it. We'd like to go there and, if they will use it, rebuild that classroom and bring it more up to date. So I have to be in touch with I first started talking with the principal right before COVID, and then they never got back with me because God knows they were doing other stuff. But this is on my list to get back in touch with them and hopefully get that in place. So that's a good place for the schools to have that trail. All right. And over here at there's this windy road is Old Trail Drive, and there's a little bitty piece of trail right here where we build a little bridge so that here is a trail into what's going to be Western Park, right? That made this trail basically connect to there. So by just that little bit, it keeps from having the people go all the way around and wade through the stream. So some things little, some things bigger. We include several things. All right, the purple ones, those are things that we can start working on. And the first one, and the one that, that I most want you guys to know about tonight is, remember I told you, take note of that little missing link. That's where the trails on the left are those behind Chesterfield Landing, and Sparrow Hill and Quarry Farm. And on the right is the Crozet Connector Trail that comes all the way into the park and the library and the ice cream store and all of this. And you can't get from one to the other because Licking Hole Creek is right there in the middle. And so we want to do a bridge. We had originally thought we could do the bridge right here, where this county property and this county property actually touch at a corner. But when we went out to look at this planned route, it's way too steep. It's like, you have to be a mountain goat to really do it. It's not good. So we need to go across a little bit of Quarry Farm HOA property here. So we've been working with them on that. This is a project that Tim Pavolino, when he was here a couple months ago, talked about a little bit. We did work with Tim and Butch at the County Parks and Rec to do a feasibility study. We were willing to fund it out of our treasury through a series of unbelievably frustrating things on my part. We could figure out no way to get our money to them so that they could pay for it. So they finally found some money in their budget. I know, it was like, we got like money, take it, and they can't take it. So,
well, I got them to find it, which is maybe even better.
So one of the things that Tim did talk about is a foundation maybe that would let us give money to the foundation for them. We're also working on a memo of understanding, an MOU with them to maybe be able to do that, because we have money to go forward with the next step on this project, and we can get it to the county to do it, right? The feasibility study suggested basically one of two kinds of bridges, and we're looking at that top one as the cheaper option. It's just a very flat, low bridge. It doesn't have handrails, so if there's flooding, the water and if there's any logs or anything goes right over. It doesn't get caught. It can just flood through, right? If you put handrails on, you have to make it higher because it would catch things. So we're looking at and me and my bike, I prefer the straight one anyway, so, but that's what we're hoping to get. We've had the Army Corps of Engineers guy has come out, because that's part of what has to happen, some Army Corps of Engineer study, and he had no issue. He said that was a place we could put the bridge. They have an interesting little report they do. That little dot there, the tack is where the bridge would be, and all that yellow is the 11 square miles of the drainage. So if there's water in there, that's all coming through where that bridge would be. So I thought that was just a really interesting thing to look at. So we were hoping to do this bridge, and the county did this wonderful, I gotta tell you, Tim and Butch made a really good grant proposal. They tried to get, it was like over $100,000, because they were doing more than the bridge. They were making fancier trails that had benches and whatever. But we didn't get it. And the main reason, they tell us, is because the easement on the Corey Farm property hasn't been clarified. So there's lawyer work that's happening to get permission from Corey Farm for us to build the trail across their piece of property. Because that wasn't finished, that would basically held us up from getting this money. Another thing that's just incredibly frustrating to me, when we say like, a bridge, but we just can't get some of these steps done. So we want to figure out what to do, given that we can't get the county money to do this right now. We're in competition with every other CIP project that the county would have. We hope that the county and Corey Farm can get this easement straightened out, because that legal thing needs to be done first. Let's get the easement straight. Once that's happened, we have enough money in our treasury to pay for a design of the bridge and the preliminary engineering. So we can get, here's a picture of the bridge, here's what it would look like, here's where it would go, here's the kind of footings it needs, here's how long it's going to be. And when we have that in hand, then we want to try to do some kind of fundraising, maybe from the community, maybe applying for grants. I don't know. I have no expertise in fundraising. I would love to find someone who wants a bridge, who wants to do fundraising, who knows how to do it, because I don't. But we think that Crozet is interested enough in our trails and our connectivity to come up with probably the $50,000 it would take to do this bridge. So that's where we stand now. And that, I think, was what I want you all to know about this project, because it's something that we're starting to work on and really starting to get some energy behind, and we're going to be talking about it more as the year goes. All right, what else can we do while we're waiting for the bridge? Over here, talk about the view. The view is here. Pleasant Green, is that the name of it? That's here. Those both have given easements to the county for trails. And we think we can start working on the part that goes by the view this winter. We can't do the Pleasant Green part until construction is finished down there. They don't like us building trails while they're driving their bulldozers around. But this goes along Powell's Creek. So that would get us, part of this trail going. So we're hoping to start work on that.
And so the north end of that, the goal is to
goes out towards, the Mint Springs Road, is that what it's called? No, is that where that is? Along Railroad Avenue?
Remember that
Railroad
yellow
Avenue.
dot?
Um,
Line ends? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what it's-
yeah.
Because, you know, I know we've talked about it before, but like, it would really be awesome to connect the whole connector trail to Mint Springs, and I guess that could be,
I think this is
One
the
of the
plan,
routes.
is this is part of it, to,
Yeah.
one of the steps towards getting there. So we do a few feet a year, you know, we do 100 feet this year and a couple 100 feet next year, you know, that's all, we, you know, we're a bunch of old people, we don't know what we're doing, you know?
I look at
Uh,
that
you're
crowd
some
and I
young
don't
people.
agree. They're very fit, all of them.
Terry,
Oh, gosh.
Terry, we have about 5 more minutes. and we're
Oh.
gonna start
Okay, sure.
cleaning up. Sure.
We're close. This piece, the county put in the plan as dark purple as I'm done, because this is part of the Barnes lumber stuff, and the county has been talking with Parkside Village to try to get this easement, and we could, once that's happening, we can start working on the trail through there. And then these pieces right here, there are easements on them. This goes from Old Trail out to Crozet Avenue. We haven't worked on this, and the county doesn't really want us to, because nobody wants us to build a trail that ends on Crozet Avenue. It's not safe to cross, you know. So we're thinking about doing this one that goes along that little stream. It's a very, we hardly have to do anything. It's a very well-used trail already. But maybe put like a little circle and a bench at the end, so it stops before it goes up the hill to the avenue. I don't know, but it's a possibility of things we could work on.
Is there a possibility of a crosswalk like at Oxbow?
Wouldn't that be lovely? Yeah. We would like to see right here at Oxbow, a crosswalk over to the Meadows. I know that people from over here walk their kids to school across there. You know, it's a VDOT thing, and it's what do I say, above my pay grade. We hope for it to come, but I don't know anything about it. And,
Jim, it took, what, a year, 10 years to get the one at Crozet Elementary School?
yeah.
With free money, outside funding.
This is below the lodge at Old Trail, and it shows all these trails are done, and they kind of are, except they put in a new retention pond. It kind of messed up some of the stuff, so we have to go back in there and reconnect some of those places. And then we'll want to be connecting to where there will be trails in Western Park as we go forward. And to get through this in 1 minute, easements is a big thing. Trails might be on the master plan, but that doesn't mean that the county actually has permission to build a trail there. Could be across somebody's private property. Came up with us this summer. We got no trespassing notices across some of our trails. It turns out they really didn't mean it there. It was just like, they wanted people to know that there was no trespassing farther on at the retention pond, but they thought they'd put them up here. But those kinds of things happen. But easements, the barriers, you know, the railroad track, you can't get across the railroad track. Crozet Avenue is a barrier. The creek is a barrier, steep slopes. Those are things that keep us from building connections where we'd like to. We still have people that don't know where the trails are or how to walk on them. And we're experimenting with new styles of maps. We're hoping to maybe put those QR codes out. You can like do your phone that says like, I am here, like 200 feet to the left, you can get out at Western Bridge or something, you know, something like that. Improving our signage, working on those things. A lot of our trails are right there in low places along streams. And, you know, they're beautiful, but on rainy years, it's not fun. And then trying to get money is the thing. So we have an idea about possibly doing trail sponsorships. This happens in someplace in Utah, Park City, or whatever. So it's an idea that somebody brought. Star Hill has given us $1 for every Love beer you buy this month. So go over to Star Hill and drink a beer. You know, Star Hill has been great. They put us on the Cheers for Charity a lot, and we've gotten a lot from them. And basically, all I'm asking of you guys is keep advocating for connections. And I just put this up because this is where I live. I live in the Highlands over here. Drives me crazy. You can see the line where when the Highlands was built, it's just a bunch of backyards. There's no way for me to get over here to Wickham Pond. And even the 1.5 blocks of multi-use trail that you see in the beautiful picture in the master plan, which is right there, and you can't get to it from here. You can't get to there. You have to go out on 3 Notch Road to get to that. It drives me nuts. And then you look at, but Wickham Pond has like a stub here, so hopefully when that Montclair, or whatever it's called, gets built, there's gonna be a way to get through there. So just keep that in mind. I think this is a great example of what not to do and what you can do when you advocate for when developments go in. And I think I'm done, Joe.
Thank you very much, Jerry.
If you have ideas of where you want trails to be, let us know, because we talked with the guys at the county, and we can work on seeing where we can get some of those in.
Thank you very much. Yes, Lonnie?
And I know also around the county, we've had some issues with trails running through places that have real county plants or habitats. And do you usually have master naturalists with you that are proactively identifying species that may be rare or uncommon, so that they're not impacted by trails? And are there any ideas about future plans or current plans to manage invasive species? Because that's another big issue of trails.
Yeah, the invasive species is a big issue that's, again, we don't have enough manpower to address that really. You know, it's just, we can't spray them because you have to have a special license, you know, to apply the poison. You need to cut them down and just come back. That's like, we need somebody bigger than us to do the invasive species. We've talked with like people about the birds. For example, Western Park, there's some concern about the trails in Western Park and that low area along the stream. If we put trails in there, will that disturb? It's a very important birding area, you know. So we work with the county of making these places, and when they have, I know when Parks and Rec has a concern, they'll bring somebody in, but I don't necessarily go. I certainly, when people talk to me, like the bird guy, I certainly listen and pay attention to that.
I'd be more than willing to come talk to you at some point about resources that you can use.
Sure.
Final question?
Yeah, I've got a number of questions. I've always been really confused as to who has administrative authority over the trails in Crozet. I see the county likes to claim them as county trails, but when I ask the county for any sort of design standards or a geo-reference map that shows land ownership and easements, they punt and are unable to provide that information. And so I would love to share more about Crozet trails, but I don't know any of the liability of using them or volunteering on them. I saw like a guy with a chainsaw. I asked a volunteer to fell a bunch of the dead ash trees up in Mid Springs, and the county's like, no, you can't use a chainsaw on county property. How are we using chainsaws on trails, which I believe maybe the county has jurisdiction over? I mean, there's like a lot of, I don't know, I was looking for like design standards, are we building them for, what uses and what trail classes? And then just trying to get a lot more information out of the county as I said, like, who's ultimately responsible? If we're out there volunteering and I get injured, is the county, I do have a volunteer agreement with the county to cover my liability. If I volunteer at the state park or the national park and I get injured on the job, their workers' comp covers me, and I can't get that information from the county either.
Yeah, we have a form that I believe says that that you hold the county not liable. I'm pretty sure that's what that says. And we have new volunteers that have that form for them.
It's amazing the state and the feds assume liability, but the county doesn't.
We're really informal with, we do stuff with the county. We're not building paved trails or stuff.
Right.
We're going out and walking on we might put some gravel down,
Yeah.
But if it's getting to like big construction,
Yeah.
we're not doing that. We're like volunteers. We're just
Right.
going out and trying to keep the trails open for the community.
Yeah, that's why I was really hoping the county to step up, and I brought forward in the master planning process, if you look at where our trails are, as you indicated, most of them are in unsustainable locations, i.e. next to water features. And that's traditionally a design flaw of trails across the country, right? Like, people want to be next to water, but that's, as you pointed out, that's where invasive species travel, that's where the erosion and sedimentation is gonna come from. But the county has put all of the green space right next to those trails because those are the only slopes that can't be built. And so it's fundamentally, you know, a challenging situation the county has put us in. And then I also would love to know from the county's perspective, can I ride my e-bike, you know, and go 26 miles an hour on these trails? I mean, you know, I don't know what the standards are, it's really hard to get any of that.
If you go 25 miles an hour on the trails, you crash. So don't.
It depends.
I ride my e-bike on it about,
Yeah.
about 10 miles an hour.
Right.
It's slow, you know, they're not made for mountain biking fast kinds of stuff, it's slow.
All right, thank you. We're gonna have to leave it there because we have to get the room cleaned up by 8:45. And so, are there any final comments or thoughts from the committee?
Can you forward the presentation to everybody? I mean,
Yes. Terry, is that all right? You mind if I share this?
okay.
Certainly. I'll send the link around.
It doesn't have a lot of words, mostly it was me talking, but
That's
that's.
Pictures and work.
All right.
Thank you.
With that,
I'll start the recording tomorrow.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.